A little rebellion now and then is a good thing. Thomas Jefferson understood the truth most people fear. Resistance is how you keep government in check. And here's the kicker. Jefferson wrote that even when he opposed the rebels, because the principle was far more important than the cause at hand. Power needs a reminder. Step out of line, and you've got big problems on your hands. That's how liberty survives and thrives. Not through permission, but with backbone. On this episode, from Jefferson to Lysander Spooner, and plenty more in between, you can't comply your way out of tyranny. But first of all, before getting to that, welcome. And thank you for joining me here on the path to liberty. My name is Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. So let's start out with the foundation. As the fiery anti-federalist Luther Martin pointed out, resistance to arbitrary power is fundamental. It was the creed of 1776. The entire revolution was built on it. He wrote, "By the principles of the American Revolution, arbitrary power may and ought to be resisted." Now, jumping back a few years, that was in 1787, almost 4 years before the War for Independence actually kicked off, Samuel Adams drew the line. When power is arbitrary or lawless, resistance isn't just some good idea, it's a duty. He said, "Who will presume to say that the people have not a right, or that it is not their indispensable duty to God and their country, by all rational means in their power, to resist them?" And in a letter to John Adams in 1774, Joseph Hawley didn't sugarcoat it. If you don't defend your rights, they're gone. He said, "The people or state who will not or cannot defend their liberties and rights will not have any for any long time." These warnings about compliance to tyrants, about the necessity of resistance, they weren't just in private letters or even like Samuel Adams in essays published in the local papers. They actually became official policy. Here, after listing a series of government abuses, basically a list of grievances, usurpations of power by the British Parliament, the First Continental Congress unanimously made it clear compliance was not even an option. They wrote, "To these grievous acts and measures, Americans cannot submit." And in 1776, Benjamin Franklin's proposal for the Great Seal said it all. Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Now, they didn't approve that for the Great Seal, but a little bit later, Thomas Jefferson took it as his own personal seal. And we don't know who actually originally wrote the phrase, but John Adams, here in a letter to William Tudor Sr. some years later, he traced the origins of it back to one of the forgotten foundations of the American Revolution. That's Jonathan Mayhew's 1750 sermon on resisting arbitrary power. Here's how Adams put it. "If the orators on the 4th of July really wish to investigate the principles and feelings which produced the revolution, they ought to study this pamphlet." He was referencing James Otis Jr. Maybe I can cover that elsewhere. "And Dr. Mayhew's sermon on passive obedience and non-resistance, and all the documents of those 9-hour days." Now, I covered Mayhew's sermon in much more detail in an episode almost a year ago. Rebellion to Tyrants, the sermon that sparked the revolution. That'll be linked to in the show notes. It'll be published a couple of hours after this live stream is done, so make sure you check out that episode if you have not yet. Now, the founders, the old revolutionaries, whether it was Jefferson or Adams or Mayhew or anyone in between, they didn't make this stuff up out of thin air. Even the Declaration of Independence, alter or abolish, Jefferson himself was pretty clear. This built on the work of many others from many years prior. He said the object of the Declaration of Independence was not to find out new principles or new arguments, But instead, he said, it was intended to be an expression of the American mind, and to give to that expression the proper tone and spirit called for by the occasion. All its authority, he said, rests then on the harmonizing sentiments of the day, whether expressed in conversations and letters, printed essays, or in the elementary books of public right, as Aristotle, Cicero, Locke, Sidney, etc. So let's look at a few of those. For example, Aristotle, he made the case all the way back in, I think it was like 350 BC. Some people don't just have the right to rebel, they're the only ones really fit to do it. He wrote, and this is probably a translation, those who excel in virtue have the best right of all to rebel, for they alone can with reason be deemed absolutely unequal. But then they are of all men the least inclined to do so. Now, Cicero considered it a moral duty, and I think this is around 40 BC. He who does not, if he can, ward off or resist the injury offered to another is as much in fault as if he were to desert his parents, or his friends, or his country. And John Locke, in his 2 treatises in the late 17th century, he warned that those in power are the ones most tempted to break the law. And he gave us the antidote. He said the properest, I love that word, the properest way to prevent the evil is to show them the danger and injustice of it, who are under the greatest temptation to run into it. And the next step comes from Algernon Sidney. Don't ask permission. No justice, no law, no obedience. He wrote, that which is not just is not law, and that which is not law ought not to be obeyed. I realize I am blasting through pretty quickly a bunch of really important historical information here, but it's my hope that this episode serves as a bit of a highlight reel for you and encourages you to do a little bit more research and some self-education on your own time. And if you're that kind of person, well, you are in luck because the 10th Amendment Center has your back for every single episode, thanks to the work of Alan Mosley getting it all organized. We publish a blog post for every single episode over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. Alan will get that all set up right after the show's done, or shortly after, once I get him my notes for the episode. And he not only has a section that has all the various platforms around both video and then audio-only podcast platforms, but if you scroll down a little bit, there's a show links section. And you're going to find all the reference links that I'm mentioning in the episode, generally in the order that I go through it in the show, as long as I did a good job with it. And that will be published a couple of hours after this live stream is done. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. I really urge you to check that out. That way you can read, learn more in context on your own time. Now, let's get back to it. Now, of course, people who love power, and of all the government people, they want you to believe that resistance, noncompliance, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, is terrible. It's going to cause all kinds of problems, chaos, destruction, and the like. But as Thomas Gordon of Cato's Letters, this is number 42 in 1721, also very, very influential on the founders and the old revolutionaries. They all read this stuff. It was published all over the place. As Gordon made clear, it's not resistance that causes the chaos. It's the opposite. Submission to arbitrary power is the real problem. He said, it is said that the doctrine of resistance would destroy the peace of the world. But it may be more truly said that the contrary doctrine would destroy the world itself, as it has already some of the best countries within it. And yet today, despite all of this stuff, whether it's from Jefferson or Samuel Adams, Jonathan Mayhew, or everyone else in between here, Luther, Martin, and the like, most people treat any form of resistance, noncompliance, rebellion, as if it's insurrection or treason, just plain evil. But Thomas Jefferson didn't, even when he disagreed with the rebellion, like he did with Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts. Here he is describing that in a letter to William Stephen Smith in late 1787. He said, and can history produce an instance of a rebellion so honorably conducted? I say nothing of its motives. They were founded in ignorance, not wickedness. So Jefferson's saying the rebellion in Massachusetts, they were ignorant. They were wrong. They shouldn't have been doing this. But if we can educate them, we can get things a little bit better. Now, that doesn't mean Jefferson was right or wrong on this particular issue, but I think the important point is he was still in support of the rebellion because it's an essential reminder to people in power. He said, God forbid we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. Now, for Thomas Jefferson, the real danger wasn't the rebellion itself, even though he disagreed with them. He thought it was founded in ignorance. The real concern, the real danger is a lack of rebellion. He said, and what country can preserve its liberties if their rulers are not warned from time to time that their people preserve the spirit of resistance? Now, as I started at the beginning here, I mentioned Luther Martin, the fiery anti-federalist, talking about resistance as a foundational or the foundational principle of the American Revolution. And James Iredell on the Federalist side during the North Carolina ratifying convention in 1788, he explained that resistance to keep government in check, it's locked into the structure of the Constitution itself. This is what they actually understood on both sides. The only way to keep power in check is to let government know, or let the people in power know, that when they get out of line, they're gonna have a lot of problems. He said the only resource against usurpation is the inherent right of the people to prevent its exercise. Iredell went on to become one of the first associate justices on the Supreme Court, a top legal mind of the time, a leading Federalist in support of the Constitution, nominated for the role by President George Washington. This says so much here. I could probably do a whole episode just on his speech there. But he's saying the only way to deal with usurpation is a theft of power. When government goes beyond its limits, it's stealing power that the people of the several states reserve to the states or to the people themselves. So this has to be stopped. And he says the only way to deal with it, not just something to try after everything else fails, not just a mere good idea, but the only way to do it is the inherent right of the people to prevent its exercise. And again, it doesn't have to be written into the Constitution. You don't have to have permission from a document. You don't have to have permission from a court or from a Congress or from a president or from anyone. It's an inherent natural right of the people to keep their creation in check. The government is just an agent of the people of the several states. Now, how do they prevent its exercise? He continued with this: the people will resist if the government usurp powers not delegated to it. And that sure did happen pretty often in the early years of the Republic, but eventually it faded over time. People got afraid. People stopped using resistance as a tool to stop usurpations of power. And I think the consequences should be pretty obvious. What are the consequences of not resisting tyranny? We see it all around us today. Thomas Gordon nailed it. This is Cato's Letters number 62, that not to resist any man's wickedness is to encourage it. 150 years later, Lysander Spooner gave us the brutal truth. Here from the end of No Treason number 6, he pointed out that compliance with tyranny doesn't just encourage more tyranny, it actually pays for it too. He said the lesson taught by all these facts is this: as long as mankind continue to pay national debts, so-called, that is, so long as they are such dupes and cowards as to pay for being cheated, plundered, enslaved, and murdered, so long there will be enough to lend the money for those purposes. And with that money, a plenty of tools called soldiers can be hired to keep them in subjection. Now, that might sound pretty bad, and it is, but there's actually a silver lining. Spooner was pretty awesome with this. He didn't just leave us with that cynical take at the end. He wrapped it up with this: the people, if they have the backbone, can actually turn it around. He said, but when they refuse any longer to pay for being thus cheated, plundered, enslaved, and murdered. They will cease to have cheats and usurpers and robbers and murderers and blood money loanmongers for masters. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a warning about the survival of liberty. But because of the government-run and government-approved so-called education system, hardly anyone today learns any of this stuff. I know I didn't. I had to seek it out on my own, and I'm glad you're here doing that with me. But since the TAC was founded 19 years ago last month, June of 2006 is when I registered 10thamendmentcenter.com. This is a big part of the reason why we work so hard every single day in and day out, month in and month out, year in and year out, to reach and teach more and more people about these essential foundational principles from the founders, the old revolutionaries, people like Spooner, from the great thinkers they all read and learned from. And nothing helps us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. You can join us for as little as $2 a month over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options. I'd be very grateful for any consideration you can give to joining us as a member today. But if you don't want to be a member or become a member and you still want to help us out financially, that's pretty awesome. I'm definitely not going to say no to that. You can make a one-time contribution, whether you're a member or not, whatever, over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. It's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate. Of course, there's a bunch of free and easy-peasy things you can do to help us spread the word, primarily by triggering the algorithm of the platform you watch or listen on, doing things just to interacting with them. Hitting the like button, leaving reviews on the Apple Podcast or any other podcast platform, subscribe, get notifications, comments in the archive, and on the video platforms like YouTube, the watch time percentage number, that metric is a biggie. So a 10-minute video that gets 10 minutes is 100%, 20 minutes watch time is 200%, and way, way, way better. So I really appreciate any help you can give us, whether it's financial, otherwise, combination of the both. I'm very grateful for that. Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. I hope you found this episode interesting. I hope it was educational. I hope it was fun to watch or listen to, but more important than anything, I hope you learned something. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time here on the path to liberty.